and hit. Thank you all for joining and being so timely today to join us for the facilitator preparation webinar. You know, I was trying to think of how to start out this meeting because there's like so many things that I want to say in the time that we have here together. But you know, I think and please, you know, I'm a little random, so there's I'm trying to condense this, but your role at our Florida Post-Secondary Education Program Planning Institute is the most critical role of any person there. We have searched and we've got folks all the way from the West Coast to up north, finding professionals that have expertise in inclusive post-secondary education. And so, yes, you've all got knowledge about inclusive post-secondary education, but we also want to help you build knowledge about Florida specific. And the reason that we want to do that, and sort of our focus today, is that our programs are established and our work is based on legislation. And so we're going to be talking about that today. And I just want to kind of set that as the preface. We do a webinar just for everyone to kind of meet everyone and to give an overview and to share with you about your responsibility, because there's really no way that you could come to the PEPI on the day of the PEPI and prepare yourself for what's to come over the next few days. This really requires some preparation time for you to understand all of the components of that. And in most cases, those of you who are brand new with us, and welcome to all of those of you who are brand new, we're so glad that you're here. In many cases, you will be working with an experienced facilitator, but in a few cases, you will be on your own, because at this time, it's looking like we will have right at 40 teams participating this year. The response has been overwhelming this year. We have been working feverishly to help folks plan. And we've told folks, because, you know, whenever we first started out, we helped people with applications, we helped people with their grants, and then they came to a strategic planning institute. We've realized the importance of strategic planning, and you all probably already know that, but for some of our teams, it's not the number one thing maybe that they think about first. Oh, yay, I want to strategically plan. Many of them think about, oh, how do we get the grant? Well, the grant is a ways down the road. You're going to strategically plan, you're going to complete a program application, and then there are grants to, you know, to support that program. And so it's just very important that we are well organized and well informed whenever we're strategically planning with our teams. Some of them are going to be very experienced at this planning process and are very efficient. And many of them, it's going to be where they maybe are familiar with the tool, but they aren't experts with the tool. We also use a couple of different platforms, and we're going to be talking about that today. So we have a website for our strategic planning. We have an entirely different platform that we call the FCSUA community for our application, grant proposal, scholarships, reporting, and invoicing. It's called the FCSUA community. It's basically, on the backside, it's Salesforce, but it's a secure site where all of that type of information comes together. And then we pull folks together because it's really, you're gonna, for those of you who haven't joined us before, you're gonna see something really cool, because it really is amazing to see the collaboration and the partnerships that build through the event. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing. And I'm recording already, so I can share this. Now, are you seeing the correct slide? Okay, so that's the welcome slide. So I want to first start by sharing with you that with so many facilitators, for the past couple of years, we've had some folks that have been doing this for quite a while that maybe even facilitated with Dr. Kohler through the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition. And so we have some lead facilitators, and you'll be finding out more about those lead facilitators. They'll actually be providing the on-site workshop at the PEPI, but those folks include Biawani from Santa Fe College, Jill Bruckner, who is with the Des Moines Foundation, Susan Loving, who is retired from the Utah Department of Education, Patrick Mulvihill, who's retired from the University of South Florida and the Transition Project there, Jeannie Repetto, who is retired from the University of Florida, Alicia Sterenberg Mahan, who is at Western Michigan University, Chris Webb, who's retired from the University of North Florida, and Gwen Williams, who's recently retired from Jackson State University. And just so all of you all can get to know everyone and know each other, just real quickly in the chat, and this will give you a warm up for something that you're probably going to do during the facilitator preparation. But if you would, just put your name and your organization, what your experience has been in inclusive post-secondary education. And then I'd like for you to just list 1 to 3 topic areas in which you have great competence. We have brought you together because we believe you have great competence about inclusive post-secondary education. But we'd like for you to really tell us those things that you feel like you know the most about, those things that are your strengths in inclusive post-secondary education. And if you would, we'll have that in the chat and I'll be able to look at that later. I wish we had time to go through that now, but I don't want to take up that much time. You'll have that opportunity to meet face-to-face. And I know face-to-face meetings are really the best, and you'll be doing that in Orlando. So if you would just go ahead and be placing those in the chat, and I see that it looks like lots of folks are doing that. And so thank you so very much. Today's purpose is to help you understand the background of the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, FCSUA, and Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs, FPCTP. We all know that language is important, and I would ask that for these terms that you try to make sure you use the whole term when you're working with your team, because we don't want teams to be confused, because we know also that there are comprehensive transition and post-secondary programs, which is the federal designation, which allows you to have to access financial aid and other things. But we want to make sure that folks understand this to help prepare you for your role and expectations of a facilitator. We want to clarify the work and product expected of the teams participating in the PEPI, and that's what we call the Florida Post-Secondary Education Program Planning Institute. We call it the PEPI, and to provide facilitation tools to help teams achieve their goals. At any time, if you have a question, please just unmute yourself and say, Drew, hold up for a minute. I have a question, because I'm not going to be able to watch the chat. Today's agenda, I'm going to give you an overview of the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act. And that's kind of going to be the flow that we're going to follow for a good part of the presentation today, because I think it's critically important that team members, and you all will be working with a team, and a team means a group of people from an institution. For instance, let's say I can see Jonathan here, so I'm going to use Jonathan as an example. Jonathan might be working with the team from Lake Sumter State College. They sent an email this morning. They said they're putting a team together. They've talked to us several times, and many of these people have been talking for several times because, you know, it takes some time to really put all the pieces together. And so, you know, that may be the team that he is working with. Each of you will be working with an institution. That may be a university, that may be a state college, that may be, and in Florida, our state colleges are what many other people would call a community college, but they do offer some type of a four-year degree. And then there are technical colleges, which some people might call a tech center or a VOTEC, but in Florida, these are the terms that we use as a technical college. And also, it could be an independent college or university that is private and not-for-profit and accredited in the state. And we do have one program that's established, and that's at Southeastern University in Lakeland. Then we're going to give you an overview of the Florida Post-Secondary Education Program Planning Institute, the PEPI, an overview of our strategic planning tool. We're going to talk about preparing for the PEPI, and then any questions that you have. But again, if you have a question, I am fine for you to stop and to ask. The Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act has four major components. It established the center here at the University of Central Florida. Senator Andy Gardner was he was the president of the Senate at the time of this legislation being passed, and he's from Central Florida, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but the center was placed here at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. We serve as a coordinating center for the state for Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs. It also established FPCTPs, which means that it established the framework. I sent several links to you a few days back, and one of those was to the legislation. And if you have time to read it, it's really very well written, and it explains very thoroughly the accountability that we're held to, the expectations, and it outlines really the work that we're doing. Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs very much align with the requirements to be a comprehensive transition and post-secondary program, or the CTP application. So if you've completed a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program application, you have the information you need for the other. But one of the best parts of our legislation is that it provided funding to put behind that legislation. And so it funds scholarships for students to attend approved programs. And all those students have to do is be enrolled in an approved program. The Act also funds initial and continuing grants to institutions of higher education. So if there's any question that we receive or where the confusion begins, it's this. An institution can develop a program and never have a grant if they don't want it. Now, everyone usually wants it. But the first step after strategic planning is having an approved program. And at that time, we do work with the Department of Education for that program to be approved. That is the key when that program is approved to unlocking the funding. It unlocks the funding to a grant, and it unlocks the funding to scholarships for students attending that program. That seems very simple, but folks really struggle with understanding that concept, that this isn't all just a grant, because many of us are accustomed to applying for a grant. You get a grant, you start a new program. No, this is about applying for a program and then getting funding to support that program. As you see here, and you're going to see on many slides, you'll see the brackets. Those are the brackets from the legislation. So purpose and legislative intent, that's section 2 in the legislation. The purpose is to increase independent living, inclusive and experiential post-secondary education, and employment opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities through degree, certificate, or non-degree programs, and to establish statewide coordination of the dissemination of information regarding programs and services for students with disabilities. Very quickly, as you're planning with teams, remember, independent living is important, especially for students with intellectual disabilities. And we all have learned lots of independent living skills in college. But that's important. So think about that whenever teams are planning. We want to make sure that this is an inclusive program. So when you sense that a team is trying to plan something that's segregated, look for ways to make their program more inclusive. The program must be inclusive. Employment is kind of where when people say, well, what kind of program should I develop? Well, one of the first things we ask folks, what are the employment needs in your area? So what are the employment needs? Who are you preparing professionals for? Which employers? These are the same employers that you would want to have a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program focus on. So it is the intent of the legislation that students with intellectual disabilities and students with disabilities have access to meaningful post-secondary education credentials and be afforded the opportunity to have a meaningful campus experience. You want to make sure they're having a meaningful campus experience. You want to also make sure that there is a meaningful credential. All of our programs must have a meaningful credential. Many of them have several meaningful credentials that students earn. But it's important for folks to understand that it's about the opportunities that students are having and about the credentials that they'll be receiving. So let's talk about, under section 3, definitions and eligible institutions. As I mentioned earlier, State University, Florida College System, and that's our state colleges, Career Center, our technical colleges. We have one charter technical career center in the state, and then any independent college or university that meets those other requirements. Those are the eligible institutions. There are a couple over 120 in the state. We're nearing 40. That's 1/3. That's exciting. Now, we have 20 programs established, and we're working with all, with that one today, I think that might be 20 that we're working with that are developing programs. And for the PEPI, you will have established programs, many of them, like Florida Atlantic University, where Dr. Mary Lou Duffy was. This will be, they've had a program for 7 years. This will be their 8th year coming up, I think. And they may have had something before they became an approved Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. They are an approved program. There will be other programs that are in the application process, and there will be other programs that are there that are interested. If an IHE pulls together a team and asks to come, they can register and they can participate. We will provide a facilitator, one of you, to work with them to begin the strategic planning process. So think about that. You're going to have a range of folks from teams that have 8 years of experience at this to teams that may have very little knowledge. They just know that they want to do something to support students with intellectual disabilities. That's a wide range. That's why where I'm saying your role is so important. And we do try to match folks very well with the teams that we have them working with. We try to keep folks with the same teams, but with a number of new teams that we have coming on board, there's probably going to be a little bit of moving around with facilitators this year. So here we go to student eligibility. The legislation states that the student must be a student with an intellectual disability as that term is defined, and that is the federal definition of a student with an intellectual disability. And then it says, including but not limited to a transitional student. And a transitional student is considered students 18 to 26. But it says including but not limited to. Many of our programs have no age limit on their program. So they may have students who are in their 30s, 40s, or maybe even a 50-year-old person that has waited for this opportunity to be able to participate in higher education, and they're in the program. Some programs may have an age limit of 26 or 28 on the students that participate in their program. But we're following the federal definition. For those of you who are not from Florida or familiar with Florida, we have some things that are very interesting here. And one of those is that the Department of Education has their definition is a little narrower than the federal definition. But we do remind people, and we certainly want to follow the rules, but we want to make sure that we are following the federal definition of intellectual disabilities. And so look into that. There are some resources into that I think I sent a link to, because an intellectual disability is more than just an IQ score. Yes, we probably know the IQ score of the student, but it's more than an IQ score. The student must physically attend the institution, submit documentation regarding their disability. Some of our programs, Florida International University, they do evaluations on their students. But students must show some type of documentation. And then, and I'm not sure why that's going off the slide, but must have exited high school. So this is not dual enrollment as some other programs may be. And so Florida post-secondary education programs are, as I share with people, it's what's next after IDEA. When the Individuals with Disability Education Act ends for a student, and that means that maybe when they graduate, they may defer and then graduate, but there's not an overlap of funding between IDEA dollars and Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program scholarship dollars. So one must end for the other to begin. So students must have exited high school. The legislation does not say they must have graduated high school. Now, a program could have that as a requirement, but the legislation actually uses the term exited high school, because we all know that there are students that have exited high school that may not have exited with a diploma. They may have exited with a special diploma. They may have exited with a certificate of completion. And we want to make sure that everyone has access to programs. Although I also share that it is inclusive post-secondary education, and post-secondary education is eligibility. It's not entitlement like IDEA. So every student is not entitled, they are eligible to complete an application to enroll in a program. Next, center responsibilities, and that's talking about us, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, and our responsibility. So an applicant, and that's meaning an institution of higher education that is completing a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program application, at a minimum, must identify a credential associated with the proposed program, which will be awarded to eligible students upon completion of the FPCTP. So many of our programs have an overarching credential, And then maybe under that, maybe students earn different types of industry certification or other types of certificates. An application must outline the program length and design, including at a minimum, inclusive and successful experiential education practices related to curricular assessment and advising structure and internships and employment opportunities, which must support students with intellectual disabilities who are seeking to continue academic, career and technical and independent living instruction at an eligible institution, including but not limited to opportunities to earn industry certifications to prepare students for gainful employment. I don't mean to be reading every slide to you, but this is legislation, so I feel like this is a little different. This is not something that I've written that I'm wanting to share with you that I've written. I'm sharing with you what the legislation says, and this may be something good to print out, to have a copy of, to have highlighted, because people are going to ask you all types of questions. I mean, it's just whenever I think I know every question that could be asked, we get another new question. And so these are the questions because you'll be our representative, our facilitator that's there, and we'll certainly be around to help with this. But you may know the answer to the question based on this presentation or your experience. Some of the folks here have lots of experience. So the application must also outline a plan for students to be integrated socially and academically with non-disabled students. Students must participate at not less than a half-time basis. And they must, with such participation, focusing on academic components and occurring through one or more of the following activities with non-disabled students. So there's going to be some academics that students are focusing on, but it can be regular enrollment in a credit-bearing course. It may be auditing or participating in a course offered by the institution, enrollment in a non-credit-bearing, non-degree course, or participation in internships or work-based training. That aligns very much with the CTP requirements. And as you see, it goes on and on our responsibilities in the application process. And this is all about the application. So to help you think about this, you're working on strategic planning with folks. They're going to take that information from their strategic plan and they're going to put that into their FPCTP application. It doesn't just happen magically. There has to be some thought behind it to move from strategic planning to the FPCTP application. So there must be experiential training and employment opportunities. Help people understand that this is their opportunity to do employment like they've never had an opportunity to do employment before. You want a job coach? Hire a job coach. But let's make sure, because we are at the college level with students who are earning credentials, that students have work experience and don't just leave and then we tell them find a job somewhere. We're looking at how we really use this funding and utilize these resources to help students transition smoothly into work experience. So there are many performance indicators that are identified by the center. All programs must complete a program report each year. There's an outline, a 5-year plan to incorporate enrollment and operation expectations for the program, and they have to do that in their application. And then we provide technical assistance regarding programs and services for students with intellectual disabilities to administrators, instructors, staff, and others as applicable at eligible institutions by holding meetings and annual workshops. So although we hope that you'll enjoy your time with us, although you're going to be working very hard, this is a requirement of the legislation that we hold an annual workshop to share successful practices and to address issues or concerns. So this is the institution's eligibility and responsibility. So to offer an FPCTP, the president or executive director of an eligible institution must submit to this, to the center the following: an application. And we have several applications that we're working with right now. It must be approved by the institution's governing board. So in the legislation, there's a requirement that both the president or the superintendent, if it's a school district, provide a letter of support, as well as the board of trustees or the school board provide a letter of support. Another area that folks struggle with, we're not asking them for a letter of support for us to send them a grant. We're asking for a letter of support for a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program. It's the program that they must share their support for. Next, they must also have documented evidence that they currently offer a federally approved comprehensive transition and post-secondary program, a CTP, that is eligible for student aid, or they must document a date by which they will send in their application to become a CTP. So one of the requirements is either that they are a CTP or that within 1 year of becoming an approved program, they complete the CTP application. And that's the part about no later than an academic year immediately following. No, this is not, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. An institution submits an application to become an approved program. And if you think about this a little bit like your accreditation process that maybe you go through, in 3 years, they're going to have to resubmit that program application. And then every 5 years thereafter. What they're going to do in the first 3 years, when 3 years comes around, they're going to share how their program has changed, how they've improved, what they've added, what they've taken away, what their program looks like at that time, and then every 5 years thereafter. So they're going to take their first application basically and see, what are we doing here 3 years later that's different than what we said in the very beginning we were going to do? And I think many of you that are at programs, you would say that what you thought you were going to do and what you're doing 3 years later looks a little bit different. And then by August 1st of each year, an eligible institution that has a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program will have to submit an annual report to the center for the prior academic year, addressing the following performance indicators: their efforts to recruit. So help them think about recruiting whenever they're strategically planning. Their efforts to retain, their completion rate, and also the transition success of students who completed the FPCTP as measured by employment rate and salary level at 1 year and 5 years after completion. So programs follow their students after they exit for up to 5 years, documenting what their salary rate is, where they're employed, do they have benefits, are they working in a field that is related to the program that they completed. And then 5 says other performance indicators, and we have some of those also. Now we're going to talk about scholarships, and this is section 7. And this is just from the legislation beginning, and that's when the first programs began, 2016-17. The Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Scholarship is established for students who meet student eligibility requirements specified in subsection 4, which is the students' eligibility we just went through. and are not receiving services that are funded through the Florida Education Finance Program or a scholarship under Part 3 of Chapter 102. Pretty much this is saying that they have exited school, and if they received a scholarship here in Florida during K-12, and we have many scholarship programs in Florida for students to receive their education away from public education, then those scholarship dollars must be spent first before they're eligible for a scholarship. But as soon as those dollars are spent, they're eligible to receive the scholarship. So our scholarships have been $7,000 a year. And this year, through proviso language during the legislative session here in Florida, they raised that to, if the need is adequate, it can go to $15,000 per year. So for those students who are in a program that might have a residential component, or maybe they're at a private not-for-profit school, their scholarships may be up to $15,000, and those are annual scholarships. So by October 1, we take all of that data that programs report to us, and we share with the governor, the president of the Senate, several other very important folks, our annual report. And our annual report, and I think I sent you that link, but it's on our website under About Us and About FCSUA. It shares every detail of how we spend our time throughout the year. Our presentations, the programs that have come on board. It shares information about the number of students that they have enrolled, the credentials that they offer, the number, even the number of staff that they have working at each and every program. Programs also have to provide us with the information of the projected number of students with intellectual disabilities who may be eligible to enroll in the FPCTP within the next academic year. And so programs have to estimate and share with us what they're using as their data to estimate these numbers of projected number of students that they will have in the coming year. Education programs and services for students with intellectual disabilities, which are available at eligible institutions. So they must provide us with information about all of their programs that are available, and that's all provided through their annual report. So here are the requirements sort of all pulled together in one slide. There must be a meaningful credential or an industry certification. They must focus on employment outcomes. There must be an inclusive context. They must be no less than half-time enrollment. It requires the definition of satisfactory academic progress. It requires a federal comprehensive transition and post-secondary program application within 1 year of approval. Those are the things that are requirements of FPCTPs. Now, we at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, here's what we provide. We provide assistance with preparing that FPCTP application and FPCTP grant proposal and the FPCTP scholarships. That's our job. So this is not a competitive application and grant process. It is about compliance with the legislation. And that's an important fact to share with your team. There is legislation, and we want to be very certain that we are following the requirements within that legislation. We help them design evaluation plans and to collect and analyze evaluation data. And so all of the annual report information that they send to us, we provide to them. We also help develop that federal comprehensive transition and post-secondary program application. And we also provide information and feedback back to state legislators. And because of that, we've had increases in both our funding of grants and our funding of scholarships through that feedback that we provide to our legislators. We also provide support, and this is not with institutions of higher education. This is with high schools in Florida, because we know that most of our students are going to be coming from high school to college. So we support to establish college and career transition clubs for grades 9 through 12 at $2,000 per year as a pipeline to FPCTPs. These are inclusive clubs that include students without disabilities, students with other disabilities, and students with intellectual disabilities. And it's a college and career transition club. And there are 8 student learning outcomes that are all focused on successful transition to post-secondary education. For instance, one is complete a post-secondary institution application of enrollment. So a student completes an application. We also provide technical assistance and support to current and developing FPCTPs. And we hope that by shortly after, as I shared earlier, Amanda Warren has come on board to help us with technical assistance, and along at the same, not long after coming on board, she's recently given birth to a beautiful little girl. And so she's out for her maternity leave, but she'll be back after the Institute. And we also hope to have a couple of other technical assistance support folks coming on board, but they won't be on board until after the PEPI. So next, we'd like to talk about the application process. Again, this is the FPCTP approval process to become an approved program. This is what the sign-in looks like for folks, but it must, and this is what we call the FCSUA community. So if you hear that term, FCSUA community, they're talking about the Salesforce portal where they submit their application, where they submit their grant, where they submit their scholarships, where all of the invoicing is done, where all of the scholarships are processed, where all of the reporting is completed. And again, it's approved for 3 years. Renewal approval is for 5 years. And the application includes descriptions of all of those things that we shared before. Here is just a little graphic that we put together of that FPCTP application and approval. It's the #1 process. And after that, programs can receive student scholarships for their students, and a grant proposal can be submitted and can be awarded. So the scholarships, and again, they're going up to $15,000 for several of for students who need that type of funding, but it can cover costs charged to students' accounts, just like any other scholarship. It's available for all eligible students, and it's dispersed through the financial aid office just as any other scholarship would be dispersed. It can cover tuition, books, transportation. For those technical colleges, travels to Skills USA. It can cover program fees such as mentors or internships, technology or equipment, or industry certification exams. Next, the other bucket of money is the FPCTP grants. So the grants at a maximum are $500,000 a year, and grants are usually on a 3-year term. So that would be $500,000 each year for 3 years, if it's adequate and appropriate. For many of our technical colleges, there's no need for that much funding for a program. So many of them are around $300,000 per year funding for their program. They provide quarterly invoices, a summary of activities, and give us an annual and a final performance report when their grant is finished. They're available, so we have initial and continuing, because once an initial grant has come to an end, folks may add in, have a second grant, which is a continuing grant. Just a minute, I'm letting somebody in right here. I'm trying to let someone in and I clicked forward. If someone else that's helping me could please let the person in that's waiting to be let in. Thank you. And then technical colleges, even if there are multiple technical colleges in a district, they may each submit a separate application. For state colleges that have multiple campuses, everything must fall under one application. So that's just one little unique. In Florida, they consider technical colleges to each be an institution. A state college is considered an institution with multiple campuses. So some of our state colleges are moving into some of the larger amount of funding whenever they have programs on multiple campuses, as several of them do. Grants primarily are covering personnel is a major expense in the grants because we know it takes support to provide a program for students with intellectual disabilities, instructors, support staff, mentors, materials, travel. We encourage folks to include professional development. We also require that they, in their grants, write in dollars to participate in the Summer Institute each year so that they have funding to be able to provide mileage and travel for their team. So here are some of the things that are just kind of Florida specific, not to say they're not in other places, and some acronyms. So remember that Florida's definition of intellectual disabilities is a little different, but we're following the federal definition for intellectual disability. With our technical colleges, they use the term occupational completion points for the different areas within the frameworks, the Department of Education frameworks that students progress. Some of those acronyms, if someone says CCT club, they're talking about our college and career transition clubs. I think we pretty much all know that CTE is career and technical education. CTP, comprehensive transition and post-secondary program at the federal level. FPCTP is a Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition program. Again, I'm sure you know that VR, vocational rehabilitation, and almost every team will have a representative of vocational rehabilitation joining in that team. There may be some others that I haven't thought of there. So I want to take a moment here and see if there are any questions that you might have from anyone.
Drew, I don't have a question, but it's just something that you said that I think I want to be able to say it, but I don't know how to say it because you say it well. That this is not a grant. And I think sometimes it's difficult for people who are applying to understand that. So you say it's not a grant. It's funding to support your program, to establish your program, something like that. How did you say it again?
I said that folks can establish a program, and that is the first step. And that is the key that allows you to submit a grant for the support of that program. They can request a grant, but they must have an approved program first before they can submit that grant. They also can request student scholarships as soon as that application is, their FPCTP application is approved. It's just, folks want to go directly to the money, B. It seems that way. And I understand that, funding is critically important to everyone. But folks want to go, tell me about the grant. Well, and certainly there's information about the grant on our website, but the grant is only for approved programs. Now, folks can work on their grant while they're working on their program application. That's absolutely fine to do. But that program application must be approved before they have access to those grant dollars or the student scholarships.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
I like the way you said it because
Well,
I
thank
know
you.
I've said it, but I didn't say it as well, which I think is the reason why the strategic tool is important.
Well, be as many. I don't think I could count the number of times that I've had to explain this because it's very confusing and we try to make it as clear. So if anyone has a suggestion, you feel free to send me a note and tell me how to make it clearer. But we work diligently at helping folks understand that process. And we just simply because of clarity, we don't mind explaining it, but it is hard for folks to understand because they could develop a program. And that's what we want to know if the superintendent or the president of the university and their board of trustees, do they support the program? Now, there may be a requirement that a grant be presented to them, and we're not telling anyone not to do that, but what we need for our requirements per the legislation is a letter stating that they support the program. Any other questions that someone might have? It's a lot of information. I know it's a lot of information. I mean, I really do. I know that it is. So I hope that I'm saying it in a clear way. So the purpose of the PEPI is to increase or expand Florida post-secondary comprehensive transition programs across the state in all types of post-secondary education institutions. The sessions that will be presented are based on questions that we have received throughout the year on technical assistance that folks have requested from us. So we've designed those sessions around their questions. We are using a strategic planning process that has continuous quality improvement at its core. And we want our programs to all be thinking about that. You know, we don't want programs to just start a program and we keep the program the way that it is and it just stays that way. We want them to continually be looking at how do we improve? What is our goal for this coming year? How do we expand, improve, change our program to better meet the needs of our students and our community? So I wanted to share with you just at a glance for those of you who may not be familiar with our schedule. And we will start on Monday, July 10th. And there will be a registration check-in, but there will be a continental breakfast from 8 until 9 for you. And then the facilitator workshop will go from 9 until 3 p.m. There will be a lunch break from noon until 1. There'll be a brief break. And then at 3:30, we will have the welcome to the PEPI at 3:30. We're excited this year to have as our keynote the director of the Office of Special Education Programs, Valerie Williams. She'll be speaking about higher education opportunities and planning for that for students. We're going to have from 5:30 until 6. We're going to ask any of our first timers, people that are there for the first time, our program folks, to join us for just a few minutes, just to welcome them and to share with them information about the PEPI. But at the same time, we're going to open the reception and showcase that we have in the beautiful foyer at the Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress. And that will be a time for you to visit programs, which will each have a display. Each of our FPCTPs will have a table, and many agencies that support our students will have tables there. It's really a great time to connect, to meet new people, and I encourage you to just be there. You'll know who your team is at that time and to meet them so that they know you as you move into the next day. On Tuesday, from 7:30 until 9, we have a breakfast and an employer award. And that really kind of starts around 8, but breakfast will be available at 7:30. And we're going to give an employer award. And then from 9 until 10, we're going to have a general session in that same room, which will be a panel of student completers, students that have gone through a Florida post-secondary education program and have completed that. And there's going to be a panel sharing their success. Then at 10:15, this is when facilitated planning begins. So there's been a general session, and then you will be, and the reason we're at the Hyatt Regency is because there's enough rooms for every team to have a separate room to meet in with their facilitator. So the facilitator will meet with their team. They will be using the strategic planning tool. The team can open up their tool also, or you can use an LCD projector to be able to project in that room, to share the plan so that you can begin the planning process. And I have a lot more information about each time that you meet, but that is your first facilitated planning time. During the time that you're having facilitated planning, there will be a boxed lunch available for your team to pick up at 11:45. So a little before 11:45 or a couple of minutes after 11:45, show up back in the main area, and trust me, no one's far away. We're all pretty close right there, to grab your boxed lunch. I won't mention anybody that maybe forgot boxed lunch last time. I won't. I'm saying that because I see a friend on here, but I won't call names. Then there will be another breakout session. So there's facilitated planning time and a breakout session. Then at 2:15 to 4:15 is another facilitated planning time. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to stand up for just a second here. So there'll be a session, then there'll be from 2:15 to 4:15. These are 2-hour sessions. So you have 3 2-hour sessions that you are meeting with your team. 2 of those will be on Tuesday. And then there will be one more on Wednesday. At the end of the day on Tuesday, from 5:30 till 6, we'd like to have a facilitator debrief. And that's a time whenever we touch base with all of the facilitators and ask you how things went, what needs to change. Do you have questions? Are you having difficulty with someone in your group? Maybe someone else, do you need some support? But it's a time for us all to talk about what are the questions that people are having. So that's called facilitator debrief, and you'll have a room assignment of where that will take place. On Wednesday, there'll be a continental breakfast from 7:30 to 8:30. Then there'll be a breakout session and another facilitated planning from 9:45 until 11:45. Then at 11:45 until 2:45, there will be lunch, and there will be report out, and those will all be done in type-alike groups. So all of the university folks will meet together, all of the state college folks will meet together, and all of the technical college folks will meet together. Because of the number of teams that we have, there are too many for everyone to report out together. So if you would, meet with the team that you've been with whenever they go, and there'll be different rooms that will be assigned for lunch, report out, and it'll be time for them to have a type-alike discussion during any time that might be left. At 3 to 3:15, we'll come together for a closing, a thank you, and the evaluation. And then from 3:30 until 4, we will have a facilitator debrief. I'd like to ask you, if at all possible, I'd like you to be at that final facilitator debrief, because we would like your input on how things have gone with your team, on what did they say? And you'll be doing this with your team each time also. At the end of each session, you'll ask them what worked, what might need to change, and then you'll be reporting that out. But those are some of the things that you'll be learning at the on-site workshop on Monday, July 10th. We use the Whova app, and that's for registration. It has the agenda, reminders, announcements, and it's also how content resource specialists will be invited to your group. So if you have not yet registered, Claudia, if you wouldn't mind putting the link to registration in the chat too, I would appreciate that. Just so folks can go ahead and register, because you have to register for the event to receive the link for the hotel. And again, all hotel rooms are being covered by us here at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, but you must make your own hotel reservation using your own form of payment, but no charges will be placed against your card unless you're using a debit card. And if you could not use a debit card, that would be easiest for you. But if you could use a credit card or a purchasing card to hold that room, then we cover all of the expenses during the week. So I'm seeing that time is moving along here, so I want to make sure that I'm moving along, but the Institute focus is creating and are expanding FPCTPs. So we're going to ask that you touch base with your team leader prior to the Institute to just meet that person and find out, is this someone that's just creating a new Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, or an established program that's looking at expanding or just looking at setting new goals? We want to use the application of the program planning model through our strategic planning tool. We want to provide information regarding evidence-based and promising practices. And we also want to be creating networks. Our teams really appreciate and learn a lot from each other. And so that's something we would like for you to impress upon any new teams and encourage them to meet others from established teams or someone that is of a like institution. So the Institute components are content sessions. There are 3 rounds of breakout sessions, 6 sessions each time. Then there is facilitated team planning meetings, which you will be facilitating. There are content resources, which are many of the folks who are our presenters or other agency folks that will be available. You'll be able to reach out to them through Whova. And also strategic planning, which takes place during the facilitated team planning time. The content sessions, there's a keynote. I said all that already. Whenever I developed this, we were at 30 plus potential teams. I think we're going to be closer to 40. Team sizes range from 2 to 10. Potential team members may include, and this shares with you all of the folks that may be included. It's a dedicated planning time with a facilitator. So you're not there to do the work. You're there to help facilitate the work, to understand the process and to understand what needs to happen in each of those 3 facilitated planning sessions. Detailed information about that is provided through the facilitator preparation manual. And I sent that to you the other day, and many of you have it from years gone by, but there's a list of everything that needs to be done in each meeting, the first, second, and third facilitated team planning time. In the final session, you're going to need to help them prepare for team report out when they'll be sharing with their type alike group. And so if you can help them with that, and that's usually just about 90 seconds So that's just a 90-second report out, which is just a very concise, and they can use any form that they want to. If they want to do a poem, if they want to do a song, if they want to do a post it, if they want to do a skit, whatever they want to do for 90 seconds to share what their focus has been. Content resources, I mentioned earlier, are experts from the field, and they'll be there for that second and third team planning meeting. And you'll have a few minutes, 20 minutes, maybe a little long, to pick their brains, to ask questions. But we want to make sure that we have resources available to you, and you will request that through the Whova app. Everything that we're doing is based on the taxonomy for post-secondary comprehensive transition programs. So we're switching gears here a little bit, and I'm not going to go into great detail because I want to have time to have discussion at the end. But the taxonomy for post-secondary comprehensive transition programs is the framework that we use for all of our work and for all of our program development. Here's a graphic. And that graphic contains a student-focused domain and the benchmarks, a faculty and staff-focused domain and the benchmarks, a program and institution-focused domain and the benchmarks, and a concept and systems development domain and the benchmarks. All of that taxonomy has been placed within the strategic planning tool, which can be found at transitionprogramtool.org with all of those domains. When you go to that website, you're going to see this, and I'm sorry that that's a little blurry, but there is a transition tab and a post-secondary education. We use the post-secondary education component. Many of our K-12 partners who have transition services use the transition component. So there are 5 steps in that planning tool. Step 1 is to enter the team and the date, and many teams will already have this done, but it may take a little bit of time for a new team. Just who is the team lead, other team members, a note taker can be assigned, and then who their facilitator was. That's step 1. Also includes here that you've got to do where you go in, team planning tool, and you're going to begin with all of the information, and you're going to see check marks over here to the right of each area. So you're going to do an assessment first. And for each domain, you're going to see benchmarks, the extent implemented, extent and the quality of evidence, priority, description, current strengths, needs, and how to develop a plan. Now, this is easier practiced than described. But once you're in here doing this, you're going to have each benchmark that's coming from the taxonomy is listed here in the planning tool. You'll also find reflective questions. You'll find indicators. And once you've done that, you're going to choose to make a plan. We ask that every team establish at least one goal at the Institute. We also ask them not to establish too many goals. They may be able to establish, because they just have 6 hours of planning, they may be able to develop 3 goals, maybe, but really we ask for them to complete one good goal. So that's what we're asking you, to make sure they complete one good goal. If they can do 2, that is wonderful, because what they're going to also need to be doing is looking at the information that they have received at the Institute, discussing that, digesting that, talking about how that applies to the strategic planning tool. There's also going to be some time where you're going to see that each of these teams is going to, you're going to hear many of these teams say that this is the only time that we have to plan. This is the only time that we have as a team to sit down and really look at this. So you're going to have to monitor that while trying to keep them focused on the goals of the Institute, but also allowing them to have that first discussion whenever they come together during that first planning time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the program planning tool, because this is what you're going to be doing in the on-site workshop on July 10th, when you're doing the facilitator preparation workshop. But this just gives you a handout, and you should each have a test site. And if you do not have a test site in the strategic planning tool, if you would please let me know, and we'll be sure to get those all developed. I think we have them all developed, and Claudia has placed the link to the transition program tool in the chat. So that is it, www.transitionprogramtool.org. You cannot break it, so please go in, practice, follow step 1, step 2, and step 3. That's what you'll be doing at the PEPI. Step 4 takes place the end of November and December, preparing for our mid-year progress update, which takes place in January. Let me say that again for those of you who are new. Step 4 of the strategic planning tool takes place in November and December, and it's a time for them to do a progress update. Where are they at in the planning process? Step 5 is an end of year report for strategic planning. This will be taking place before the Institute in July. This will be taking place sometime, either it may be already, many of you have already scheduled this, and this is for people who were facilitators last year. So if you're brand new, don't panic. You have nothing to be doing right now, but other folks that have been with a team at the PEPI also met with that team to do the mid-year progress update in November, December for our January meeting. And they're also currently meeting with teams to complete the end of year report. This is a great way for teams to be able to see the progress that they've made and help them really prepare for the Institute to know what they want to work on next. So some of the things that we would like for you to do to prepare for the PEPI, review your team's plan. Now, teams have not been assigned yet. You will receive an email that tells you which team you've been assigned to. If you're assigned to that with a lead facilitator or a co-facilitator, that information will be in that email. And that will be coming out sometime probably that'll be coming out in June. So you'll have some time before we meet. Some folks are not done yet with that end of year report. And so that will be still being completed, but you'll also find technical soundness reports in that plan once you know which team, and you'll be assigned to that team's site, and that's the team that you'll see whenever you log in once you're assigned to that team. The facilitator preparation manual gives you additional information, probably in a much better format than what I'm doing here. It gives you information on key facilitation skills, leading group discussions, some hints, establishing small work groups, managing conflict, using flip charts, strategies for working with controversy, facilitator roles versus team leader roles. And that's important for you to know because there will be a team leader with that team and they should be leading the team. You should be facilitating the team. If you have a laptop, we would appreciate it if you brought that. Once confirmed, reach out to the team leader once we have shared with you who that is. Registration has already opened, so please, if you haven't registered, make sure that you go ahead and take care of that. Book your hotel because it's filling up quickly. And it is a little bit of, well, there are a couple of other hotels that are nearby, but we really would like the facilitators there on site to, because it'll just make things a lot simpler. So please go ahead and take care of those booking needs. Travel and spend authorizations. We've been meeting with folks about that to book for those of you who need flights. If we have not reached out to you and you have not yet shared that information, please send me an email and we'll take care of that this week. Please, if you can, most of you will be coming in on Sunday because Monday, July 10th, in the facilitator preparation workshop that's going to be on site. Here are some of the major headings that you're going to be looking at. You're going to have a chance to get into the strategic planning tool, but please practice long before you get there. You'll also be talking about technical soundness and be able to look at the technical soundness report for the team that you're working with. If you're not following us on social media, we have lots of social media out there and you can find out about many of our programs. I included my email there. I would hope that all of you would have my email, but that is also my cell number and you're welcome. But please text me and tell me who you are if you're calling me and your identity doesn't come up on the phone, because just like everyone else, I get so many spam calls that if I don't know the number, I usually don't answer it, but you're welcome to text me and to use that cell phone number. Any questions at this point? I have just a few more slides and we'll be done. Okay. We've also included, and Amanda and I worked on this presentation some, the strategic planning tool looks at a goal, task, output, person responsible, projected completion date, and outcomes. And the next slides that you will see in this presentation, and I will be emailing this to everyone, you'll see gives you some bullet points of areas to look at for goals. And this is really information that has come from our technical soundness work with Alicia Mahan at Western Michigan. Outputs and products, outcomes, evaluation and indicators, evaluation and data sources, the task, as well as the logic model. And the logic model is required for the grant. It's not required for the program application. It is required for the grant proposal. But we're going to be touching on each of these, and I just wanted you to have that information on those. And I want us to have some time for me to stop sharing and for us to have a discussion. So I'll stop sharing there. So please, I know that's a lot of information, but it's not everything. There's still a lot that will be covered in the day of the workshop. So what are some of the questions that maybe new folks have? And please feel free, whatever your questions are, because this is a lot of information to share in a short period of time. Or what is something new that you learned about that you didn't know about before about Florida Postsecondary Comprehensive Transition Programs or our PEPI? Anything? I need a little feedback here, people. Marcus, do you have something? Did I see your hand go up, Marcus? Okay, all right. Marcus gave me a thumbs up. I hope that I haven't
Drew, I
totally.
have a question.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline.
You're welcome. So for the online strategic planning tool, will we get access to our teams once the team is assigned?
Yes, but before that, you will receive access to a site that will be called Jacqueline Test.
Okay.
You can go in there and play around like you're a team. And the other thing is, Jacqueline, and that I didn't specifically mention, is that whenever you're meeting with your team, you don't have to be the one entering it. There can be a note taker that's entering that information into the tool. You're simply there facilitating. Now, you might choose to be the one typing, but it's not your responsibility. It's your responsibility to facilitate things there. And so most of our teams, have had experience and have some experience. Well, I won't say most, because we do have a lot of new teams. We have, let me say, half of our teams have experience with the tool. But yes, you will be receiving that and a link to that. I will let you know. Many of you already have test sites that are there in that strategic planning tool. Those of you who have facilitated with us before.
True. And I want to share that the test sites for the new facilitators, or those that have not been in the system with a facilitator role, are ready. The link is the link that that Drew mentioned and I shared in the chat. So the only thing that you have to do for you, if you're a brand new user to the system, is log in with your email address as your password. That's all you need. After that, you will be prompted to set up a password for your account. So that's an easy way for you to remember. For those that are brand new facilitators, just go into the transitionplanningtool.org, select the post-secondary component, and enter the email address that we have been using to communicate with you as the password. That's it. You always see there that it's a test, that's your name. So you can use that site for learning a little bit more about the system without interfering with the data of your team. So it's your sandbox playground for you to use to explore. And if you have any problems accessing it, please let us know. So you all should have a test site. For those that are returning facilitators, you had that before, but the new ones, I recently created those sites. So that's all you need. So password, it will be your email address for the first time, and then you set up your password for from that point on.
And I am realizing right now that I forgot to introduce someone that I could not do what I do without, and that is Claudia Bellapunto, who just spoke. And Claudia oversees all of our work with the online strategic planning tool and make sure that it works smoothly, as well as the FCSUA community. So Claudia will be there, and she is a great resource if you have questions, other questions that someone might have. Yes, Sandy. Sandy, you're muted, I think.
Sorry about that.
There you
Quick question that Claudia was saying about the password. So previously I had a different email address, and then of course when I moved jobs I switched over. So would I be getting a new password, a new email set with my new email?
We can take care of that, Sandy. Yes, you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Claudia.
Yeah, I was thinking that we have Sandy and a couple other facilitators that have switched emails. So let me know who is in that situation, and I can update the email address. I will suggest for those in that situation that have an issue logging in, like using your previous password, because I know, Sandy, yeah, you have accessed the system before. I will say use the forgot my password link that's located in the sign in, just to make sure that you have a password associated with your new email address in the system. That's all you need. But yes, let me know who is in that. I think I just updated actually for Gwen. Since she retired, she just provided her new email address, and it is like a 2-second step.
Right? That's right. Yes, Michelle.
I just have a quick question. Sorry, my headphone fell out right when you said about the site. So what, can you repeat again where we find the test site so we can put that in and play with it?
Let me share it in the chat so it's easier for
Okay.
for you to get it. Let's do that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There it is.
That's the link right there in the chat. If you click on that and then use the email that we've been using to communicate with you to sign in, that's your login and your password.
Okay.
Use it for both, and then you'll be prompted to develop your own.
Thank you.
Yes. Other questions that someone might have. And at any time you feel like, I don't know if I'm interested in doing this anymore, let us know ahead of time, because we're counting on you to be there. It is, I know it may seem a little overwhelming, but once you have done this, have a year behind you, you'll really understand the process. Marcus, is this your second or third year with us? Second year. And, once you're in there with a team and probably with another facilitator, you'll really understand how smoothly this really works, because the system actually guides you through it. Other questions? If you have a question, you can email at any time or call. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. One of the things that we're going to do this year, and we're even going to do this in facilitator preparation. We're going to use an app where people can ask anonymous questions, and there will be a screen. We'll have a portable TV there in the room. So you'll be able to ask a question without anyone else in the room knowing that you've asked a question. We're also going to have that with our larger group whenever we pull all the folks together. We're just wanting to provide that because we're wanting to make sure that we're answering the questions that people have, because I can't imagine that I've done that good of a job explaining this today to you, but I'm hoping that I gave you somewhere to start and a place to begin. I want to thank you all for your time today. I want to thank you for agreeing to serve as a Florida Postsecondary Education Program Planning Institute team facilitator. Again, your role is vital to the success of our institute. And I spent many, many hours on that facilitator manual, and you'll find lots of great information in there. So please look through that manual. It'll answer some of your questions. I'll be sending out again this PowerPoint. I'm not expecting brand new folks to understand everything, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have, and you can do that on a one-on-one basis through email or through phone. Any other, from our lead facilitators or from any established facilitators, any words of wisdom to the new folks on the call before we sign off?
This is Margot, and I would recommend having one of your team members be the note taker and be the one that words their goals and tasks. It's more important for them to have ownership of their plan than it is for us to write it all out in what we believe is a perfect goal or outcome. And so it really takes I'd rather have a plan that they have ownership of than have a perfectly written plan, if that makes sense.
Good words. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would also say make sure there's a timekeeper, depending on how many people. Give everyone in your team a task to do. That way everybody takes ownership.
Right. Right, exactly. And there's tips on that in the manual about, because there is a team leader, but this is a team activity. So you want to try to, those folks that are quiet, you want to try to, pull them into to get their feedback too. Jeannie.
Yeah, the other thing to go along with this is I think it's really important, at least it helped me a whole lot when I first started, because I thought I'm going to go in there and we're going to get all these goals done. It was really helpful when I was given permission to do 1 or 2 goals, because what that did is it allowed me not to push the team and let the team kind of discuss what they needed to do also. So really 1 or 2 goals, because that's teaching them how to use the instrument and do the goals. So then they can do more later if they want. So that was, to me, was really important, because I was all set to get this whole baby done, and you can't.
Sounds like to me that your team was forming, storming, norming, and performing. I think that's the right order, but if you'll look in your facilitator manual, you'll find out about that.
And then some, right?
Not that I'm pushing the facilitator manual. Someone else, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw someone else's hand maybe come up. Please just speak out if someone had their hand up. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that everyone had a great Memorial Day. I hope that everyone has a safe 4th of July. You'll be receiving emails with your team assignment. And if you have any questions about travel, please, let me know so we can make sure that this all works as smoothly as possible. Please remember to go ahead and register and to get your hotel reservations made so that and this is a beautiful facility. It's the only facility that was large enough to handle us, and who can help it if it's the Hyatt Regency? I mean, you do what you have to do, but it is a great facility, because if you have 2 teams in one room, it's going to be disturbing. It's going to be disturbing. So we have really worked very hard for every team to have their own room to meet in, so that you can have quiet time to focus, to discuss, and to plan. You're a great group of folks. I appreciate your attention today, and for your willingness to serve. And for those of you who I don't know well, I'm looking forward to spending some time with you at the Pepe and getting to know you. And thanks again for your help. Good
Thanks,
day,
Joe.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm stopping the recording now. I could have done that earlier.